Okay, so what do I mean by a personal creative ecosystem? Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I know it's been a while. This is a really busy time of year for me in my teaching and in my work with Altitude Press. I'm doing a lot of editing right now. We've got stories coming in. I had classes wrapping up for the semester. But I'm finally kind of able to get back to my own personal creative ecosystem, which is what I want to talk about today. So, what do I mean by that? I came across a note from a writer I worked with quite a long time ago, and this is something that I hear in one form or another kind of over and over again from not just writers, but just creative people. And I think any of us who are pursuing some sort of a creative path, whether it's writing, dance, acting, music, any other kind of art, a visual art, things like that, can probably relate to this particular pressure that if we really decide to pursue it in a professional way, we want to sell our wares, our artistic wares, there is a certain pressure that comes with that. I think that's pretty commonsensical, right? That once you decide, hey, this isn't just for me, I'm going to go wide with this, whatever it is, this sort of creativity. There is sort of a, you know, financial pressure that can come with that, a time pressure, because once you decide to go for something more than in just a sort of playful way, when you decide to go pro or partially pro, part-time pro, right? There are definitely pressures that come with that. So where writers are concerned, in particular, I thought this note from this writer was really interesting. Basically, they talked about continuing to work on making themselves as happy as possible. And I'm reading it off my screen here. That's why I'm sort of staring off here into the distance. With all aspects of life, allowing writing to be the biggest passion without burdening it as being a magical cure-all. Now, just to provide some context for this, we had been speaking about this very common topic of, should I try to go for, I really want to be a writer, should I really go for it and make that my career and just, that's my full-time job now. I'm just gonna do this, and I'm sure it'll work out. I'll get, writing gigs, I'll get published, I'll do some freelance work, whatever that looks like, right? Or I'm going to be a full-time novelist, and I'm sure I'm going to start sending my work out on submission, or querying agents and they'll send my work out on submission. I'm sure it'll all work out. First of all, I advise against that unless you have what used to be called a patron of the arts, which I've mentioned on this podcast before, would just be lovely, right? Someone who would just finance our creative endeavors. But especially if you have bills, and who doesn't, right? And especially if you are responsible for kids, for animals, for any dependents, as the IRS might call them, I really advise against just going into that, what I think, not to be too much of a downer, but what I think is, especially in this day and age, a little bit of a magical thinking place, or a lot of a magical thinking place, that it's all going to work out because I can see it clearly. I know I'm good. I know I'm a good writer. I'm skilled at what I do. So I'm just going to go for it, throw caution to the wind. It's a very romantic, sort of fantastical way to think about it, right? Well, a real writer would do this sort of thing. And I find that it is more common in younger writers. And again, I think that stands to reason. That is not to put down younger writers. That's not to say that younger writers, can't have good business sense and are just going to go off on these flights of fancy and it's going to be a disaster. That's not to say that. I very much had that tendency as a younger writer as well. So I think for younger creatives, this is something that older people did tell me, and I think today it bears repeating. So if you are a younger creative, you're in your teens, you're in your 20s, maybe even your early 30s, from my vantage point, I still count that as a young creative. So if no one has told you this, I will tell you, don't quit your day job. And again, I'm not trying to be cynical. I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I really mean that. Even if you are your dependent, you're supporting yourself, and your day job is maybe not the highest paid, but it kind of gets you by and pays the bills, please don't shift that burden onto your work. And again, this is what this writer here said. I should make myself as happy as possible with all aspects of life, and allow writing to be the biggest passion without putting that burden on it to be a magical cure-all. So I think this gets to that fantasy that so many of us have as creatives. We can see this life of beautiful creativity. We wake up in the morning, we head to the studio, we head to the writing desk, we head to wherever it might be that we create our wonderful creations that have maybe started selling. Maybe we get a lot of compliments on them. Maybe teachers have complimented us a great deal on our work in the academic sphere. I've talked about that quite a bit on the podcast too, and that's great. That can be so motivating and so inspiring, and it just feels good, and it can make us feel very, speaking for myself here, I shouldn't say us because I can only speak for myself. I know when that positive feedback comes, whether it has been from the traditional publishing houses or teachers early on, or fellow writers, critique group partners, beta readers, etc., that has been wonderful. And it has this feeling of alignment, of synchronicity, of yes, everything is as it should be, and it's aligning more and more with my vision of what I want my life to be. As we know, unfortunately, life generally doesn't work that way. Life often, sometimes it does, things line up, the stars align, as they say, and especially with great planning, some wonderful things can happen. But life also happens, right? We get sick. Someone we care for gets sick. We have other issues come up, interpersonal issues. Boy, I could go off on a whole tangent here, and I'm going to rein myself in, but will really quickly say, and I think I might do a video on this general topic. I started watching the new documentary about the Judds, the singing group, the Judds. What's it called? What's the, I can't remember the sort of subtitle of it. It just came out, but I find it very, very compelling because it is all about that deep creativity, heavily enmeshed family and interpersonal relationships, and how they can affect creativity. They can inspire it, and they can kind of harm it too. But again, I'm going to keep myself on track with this current topic. But all sorts of things can happen in all sorts of different areas of life, right? And they can affect our creativity. They can affect our energy levels. I'm in a time of life when physiologically, without going into too much detail, anyone who is in this time of life can kind of relate. If you've been there, done that a little bit, you're maybe in your mid 40s on. I am in a time of life when energy levels have shifted and kind of continue to shift, and they're not always as predictable as they used to be. That's both creative energy, mental energy, and physical energy, the need for sleep, the need for optimal nutrition, and for just, especially when it comes to writing, for just the ability to have complete focus in a very quiet atmosphere and to really time when I work, where I work, etc. So that too will come into play if you decide I'm gonna take the bull by the horns, the horse by the reins, insert your favorite saying here, and I'm just going to do this full time. All of those things can come into play. We have to, I think, if we're going to be intellectually honest with ourselves and creatively honest with ourselves too, we really have to take a look at the landscape. It can be, as a young person, hard to do this because you don't have a whole lot of experience maybe, or maybe you do have quite a bit for your age, but I would say chronologically, most young people haven't yet experienced the wide range of things in life that can happen, that can really have an impact on us. So you want to be able to take a look at the landscape. You want to be able to really think of it in terms of like a business plan. What happens if? What is my fallback if? And I think when we start to do that, again, unless we have a patron, unless we're sort of independently wealthy or we're completely supported, in which case this video probably doesn't apply. But realistically, how many people does that apply to? I don't think it's that many. I think that's pretty tiny portion of the population that has nothing to worry about financially. But that's no guarantee that other aspects of life won't kind of take a little bit of a nosedive and require shifting priorities. This is all sort of a long way to say, be careful. And this is why I don't encourage, even if you have the dream, you see the vision, you know what you want to do, you can just see it happening. You have that very strong inspiration, which I think as writers and creative types in general, we tend to have, right? We are often visual thinkers, and this reminds me of Temple Grandin's wonderful book, Thinking in Pictures. We can often see a course laid out, and then if we are getting that external validation, it's almost like this is a sign. I'm supposed to do this sort of thing. So this is where our really logical think Spock brain needs to come in and really question every bit of that. What happens if I get sick? What happens if I'm just not feeling it? What happens if I get some negative feedback? What happens if I get rejections from publishers, from agents who I'm trying to query? And this writer goes on to say that one thing that helps them to overcome rejection from editors, as someone who is submitting their writing on a regular basis, is trying, this is a quote, trying my best to be good at other things in my life besides writing. So this is where I come back to the beginning of the beginning of the video, to this idea of the personal creative ecosystem. PCE, it doesn't really roll off the tongue, right? It's no way to make it, kind of shorten it, make it snappy, but that's okay. I think of this as making sure that you are not putting all of those eggs in one basket. And I mean that professionally speaking. Again, don't quit your day job. I beg you. And if you do, okay. But really think about it. Think about the what ifs. Think about how you're going to support yourself and or any dependents you might have. As we know, even a little cat or a dog, and one of mine is sitting right here under the camera as I'm recording this. Boy, they're just lovely and wonderful, and I've adored all of my animals, but they can get expensive quickly. Something can go wrong quickly. So be thinking about all that. Let that Spock brain take over. And so not only don't put all your eggs in one basket, but make sure you are cultivating a variety of things that kind of make you creatively happy, right? So I've talked a little bit about the financial aspect of it. Don't, be careful about just putting that whole financial burden on your writing. It's going to support me. I know it's going to work out. Maybe you've had a sale. I remember after selling, my agent at the time sold my second novel, and the advance was significantly larger than the advance for the first novel had been. Still not a quit your day job advance, but it was significantly larger. And I thought, wow, this could really be the start of huge things, and maybe this is the sign. But cooler heads prevailed. My cooler head prevailed once time went on and I started thinking about it and really doing the calculations and really thinking, do I want this to be my job? Do I want to stop teaching, which is what I was doing at the time, what I continue to do, or and make the writing my job? Or is balance actually pretty good right now? It's a lot, especially when you have a book coming out and you're going through the editing process and you've got PR and you're speaking. I was speaking at national conferences in those years, and I was, working with the publicity department, and I was doing edits, and I was also trying to work on the next project, because you have to focus so much on this one book when you have a book coming out, but you also need to be thinking down the road. And then my kids were pretty young at the time, and then I had my career, so it was a lot. And in a way it sounded good to streamline. Well, I'll just make writing it. I'm sure this is going to work out. Everything's great. And everything was great. However, one of the huge things that's out of your control as a writer, wanting to go pro, wanting to go commercial, wanting to sell your work and have the work be self-supporting. One of the huge things that's out of your control is the thing that you absolutely need to have, and that is people willing to pay you money for your work. And there's no guarantee of that. I have met best-selling authors who wrote these breakout wonderful books. They were amazing, and then the next one just kind of, if it came out, it kind of maybe fizzled. So there really are no guarantees. That is such a cliche to even say that, right? There are no guarantees, but boy, I think the one guarantee there is in publishing and in trying to live by one's writing is that uncertainty abounds. It just abounds. Can you stack the odds in your favor a little bit? Absolutely. And there are so many ways to do that. I talk about this quite a bit in past episodes, so I won't go into detail, but what we can control is the quality of the writing, how hard we work at it, whatever the type of project we're working on. But other than that, much of it is very much out of our control. So again, getting back to what this writer said, that if they put 100% of the hopes and dreams into the writing, then when rejection did come, it would really be devastating. I'm here to tell you, I have been devastated by rejection in years past. So I definitely understand that. As creatives, as writers, we can tend to be, and again, I don't want to paint with a really broad brush here, but we can tend to be sort of sensitive souls. And so when we do come across the sort of the cold slap of commerce, especially when it's a rejection, that can hurt on more than just a financial level. That can hurt on what can feel like a soul level. Our work that we're so passionate about, have worked so hard at to hone our craft, for instance, has just been told we've been told it's not good enough. So that can be super painful. And I think even more so when we have all those eggs in the writing basket, when we're all in with the writing, and that's it. That's our career. We've quit our job. We've have our little cabin in the woods, or in my case, we've got our little vintage trailer, right? My little Shasta here. This is Rosie, for anyone who is new here. And one of these days I'll do a whole tour of the outside and everything. Actually, you can probably find some shorts if you look on my channel. But I did not get Rosie several years back and then say, I'm quitting everything. This is it. This is my little writing cabin, and I'm going to just live in here now. I mean, I guess I could have, and maybe in my 20s I would have done something like that. It sounds kind of romantic, sounds kind of fun, but then the reality sets in, and maybe not so much. So, as this writer was saying, if I've put all of my hopes and dreams into just the writing, and then I get rejection, it's going to be even more painful. It's going to be more devastating. And if the writing is my only thing, then rejection means I am basically failing at everything. So again, that's what happens and sometimes you need to dare greatly. You need to take risks. I think all of the great success stories in the world, at some point, those individuals have taken great risks, and not always calculated risks. So there is that element of luck that can come in, but again, not in our control in a way that is predictable and that we can really sort of plot out. So that's another reason. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. So as this person says, that means setting goals for things other than writing, maybe a fitness goal. This one I love, and I've talked about this in the past, about physical activity and creative activity and how they work together so well. Last fall, I started getting into Pilates. I had done Pilates back in the day when it was sort of, back probably in the 1990s. It was kind of had a resurgence of popularity. It's been around since, I think it's World War I, when Joseph Pilates first developed the technique. But I kind of dipped my toes in it back then. I hadn't gotten really serious, but this last fall, I really sort of got into a Pilates practice. I'm a huge fan of being outdoors anyway. I'm a huge fan of physical activity, going to the gym. But in the winter months, it's not always possible or practical to, get on the roads if it's really bad weather or just time-wise. So I was finding Pilates very doable, something I could sort of hone and do at home, and really, really enjoying it. So to this writer's point, that is a wonderful thing. Cultivate something else. And an exercise practice can be creative as well. Maybe it's dance. Maybe it is some form of physical expression that requires some sort of creativity. So that can be wonderful. It doesn't have to be a non-creative outlet. So growing something in the garden, this person also mentions, which is another thing I just love. I got ahead of nature this spring, And we have had it in here on the mountain in northern Arizona, on the mountains. We have had a very sort of odd winter, very dry, windy winter, and then a protracted cold early spring. So as I record this, we're finally having a really pretty day. The mail lady came by about an hour ago, and she and I were just looking around. She said, "Can you believe we have this nice weather?" But gardening is something that you can really kind of do all year round. Like I said, I got an early start because I was just not having it anymore. I needed to grow something. So I started some seedlings, and just seeing something, not that I created, but that I sort of helped usher into the world grow, is a wonderful thing. And it's a wonderful compliment to the writing, especially if I'm not really feeling the writing, which again, back to my point about the different stages of life we're in. I think I have a lot in common right now with those who are in the stage of life where they have small children, because I adored those years when my kids were little, but oh, talk about exhaustion and talk about energy levels that I couldn't always predict, that weren't always in my control, because kids have the needs they have as they are developmentally sort of moving up the chart. And so I feel almost like I'm an echo of that now with the energy levels. So something like gardening, exercising, great way to reduce those endorphins. I'm a big fan of that. And always remember that the physical influences the mental, psychological, emotional, all of those creative, the creative brain, and vice versa. So cultivating multiple aspects of life is wonderful. Maybe your thing is sort of like my thing with Rosie. I love to do a little decorating. I love to make her really cute and girly. It's just fun, and researching vintage trailers and how people can make them really, really neat. I'm so inspired by some of those, by the way. If you are a vintage trailer or a vintage car person, you'll totally get this. So maybe that's your thing. And that's incredibly, I think any sort of design work is incredibly complementary to the writing life. Any sort of visual arts, maybe you're a painter, maybe you're a mosaic artist. I just think that it's part of developing a wonderful, rich, creative life. So again, that personal creative ecosystem. Think of it not just as I'm planting one thing here. I'm going to grow garlic, and that's all my garden is going to be. That's fine if that's your thing, but why not try some, as I did, some of the first flowers I actually put outside, and they're still alive, are my violas, the Johnny Jump Ups, or violets, some people might call them. These are sort of the bigger ones. Why not, expand a little bit? Try some things you don't normally try. Try a form of exercise you've never tried before. Try to stretch yourself, because again, when we don't, and we get so laser focused, whether it is financially or whether it is just creatively, it can put a lot of pressure on the thing. I would venture to say that writers these days who are looking to have their work published, who are, especially if they're not self-publishing, not going indie, which I'm a big fan of that as well, when done a certain way. There are a lot of scams out there. That's another video entirely. But I would venture to say that there are more than ever some incredible pressures on writers. And it's it's really tough. It's really tough out there for writers trying to get published, especially a full-length work of, say, fiction, a novel, or maybe a memoir, or even nonfiction. It's a tough market, and I think it has been for years. I don't see that letting up anytime soon in the traditional publishing realm. I would love to see that. I would love to see things just flourish and open up, but I don't think we're seeing it yet. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. If you have experience in that realm, maybe you're agented, maybe your work is out on submission, maybe you've sold manuscripts in the past couple of years. I'd love to hear more about your experiences there. So try not to put all of that, right? Yes, financial pressure, but also psychological pressure on the writing. I think one of the things that comes up for people at this point when they start thinking, okay, I'm hearing that it's a good idea to branch out, or to do other things other than just being laser focused on the writing and having that be such a black and white thing. The concern can be, but won't that take away from the writing? If I get into a new exercise fitness program, that's more hours in the day, and those are precious to me. Or if I start doing more visual art, isn't that sort of leeching off um, from my main creative pursuit, which is, let's say, the writing? I would say, I guess that's possible, especially where time is concerned. We all have 24 hours in the day, and a chunk of that needs to go to sleep. If unless you don't need to sleep, which I cannot relate to you if that is the case, because definitely for me, a chunk of that, a sizable chunk, needs to go to sleep. Um, and developing good sleep hygiene. Again, that's probably a whole nother video for writers, but um, I would tend to say it could, if you become sort of that you're spending hours and hours at the gym, or hours and hours on this routine, or hours and hours painting or dancing, and really you have a writing project that needs to be a little more central. I guess it's conceivable, but the thing is, when we bring other things in, when we allow room for, I'm going to go, out to the Shasta for half an hour and record a video. When we allow for that, because this is one of my other outlets, it's just a complement to the writing, right? I'm not making money off my channel. I'm not trying to make money off my channel. It's just sort of an outlet for me to share some of my thoughts on writing. That is possible, I guess, that you could spend so much time at other things that the writing would suffer, but that is something that is actually in your control. You can catch yourself. You can go, wow, I'm really spending tons and tons of hours at the gym, or tons and tons of hours painting, in which case you also might want to pay attention to that, because maybe that's trying to tell you something that you want to somehow combine the two a little bit more. Maybe you want to change gears a little bit as a creative person, and that's fine. It's just like a garden. Some things will take over one year. Well, not so much here in northern Arizona, because we're sort of always fighting to get anything to grow. But for people who live in more normal places with good soil, sometimes some years things will take over and other things won't really flourish, and then the next year there's more of a balance. But you, I think, more so as an artist than a gardener perhaps, are in control of that. You can keep track. Today I want to make sure that I do other things, reading, for example. I'm reading a great book about Judith Jones, the editor. Again, I don't want to get off on a little path here, but it's a great book because, back in the day in the 40s and 50s, for writers, and in her case, an editor, there were just more opportunities for other things, for doing other things that complemented the writing. But that is something that's in your control. And so think about that. Again, think of it not just as, this is my writing life. My writing life is my creative life. Maybe shift your mindset a little bit to thinking about it as my own personal creative ecosystem. In my garden, I mainly grow fill in the blank. Maybe it's roses, maybe it's tulips, maybe it's fruit trees. But I also like to grow an herb garden or a little flower garden. The same thing for creatives. My main form of creativity is the writing, and I also like to fill in the blank. I like to do this, this, and this. And what you have there is sort of this more, I think, vigorous, creative, satisfying creative life. And as this writer points out, you're not putting all the pressure on that one thing, and that one thing is not responsible for you either having a great day where you're getting great feedback and you're making sales and everything is going your way, or the opposite, a really not so great day when you're stressed out, which it's not a great precursor to rich creativity, right? You're stressed out, you're unhappy, you're worried, you're starting to doubt yourself and doubt your ability to do this. So I hope I've articulated all of this in a way that sort of makes sense. I think this is sort of a large ongoing conversation, and it's all about balance. It's all about, if I'm taking myself seriously as a writer, what does that mean? Does it mean I'm totally blinders on, single-minded of purpose, and this is all I do? Or can it be, I love the writing, I want to continue to nurture the writing, and the way I'm going to do that is by not putting all of my pressure on the writing, all of my eggs in one basket, all of my hopes and dreams pinned on this one thing. where the writing might be in my control, but how the writing is received when it goes out into the world is largely not in our controls. And that's just, I don't think that's either good or bad. It just is what it is. So think about that. Think in terms of whatever you might call it, whether you're calling it a personal creative ecosystem, which is the way I think about it, or something else. Think about how you can, rather than get more clenchy when you think about devoting more time to writing and really getting serious with your writing, rather than doing that, think about kind of expanding, taking a breath, and how can I enrich the writing so that as the ups and downs come, there's sort of a buffer there, right? There's sort of a buffer, and it's not either things are great or things are awful and I should quit writing and never do it again. So it speaks to longevity, it speaks to happiness, and just general well-being. And I think, well, I definitely need that every day. I think everyone does. Life isn't always easy, but I think this is one of the ways we can really help our writing to grow and just be happier in the journey. So I would love to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Thanks to the new subscribers. I noticed I had some new subscribers, which I'm so grateful. It's kind of interesting since I haven't posted a video in so long, but maybe people are finding my old content. So anyway, have a great day, write on, and I will see you all hopefully soon.